Welcome to Avon Talks, Avon, Connecticut's monthly TV show and podcast about its history, people, landmarks, current events, and all that makes Avon the town and community it is today. Produced by the Avon Historical Society and hosted by me, Ethan Guo. Today we are joined by the former Avon town historian and current president of the Avon Historical Society, Terri Wilson, as well as Nora Howard, who from 1982 to 1993 served at the Wethersfield Historical Society, first as the director of education and then as the executive director. Nora is also the author of 4 books, Stories of Wethersfield, Avon, A Photographic History, Rufus Hawley, Catched on Fire, the Journals of Rufus Hawley of Avon, Connecticut, and A Tale of Two Meeting Houses and Their Communities. And now she resides in Avon and is the historian of the Avon Congregational Church. So essentially, all knowledge about Avon history is shared between these two individuals. Welcome, Terri and Nora. How are you doing today?
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
Thank you. Yep.
All right. So you two have both worked in some capacity in Avon town history. And the thing is, a lot of people don't really know what that is. They don't really know what community history is. So do you guys mind kind of explaining what your positions are, what your roles, like what your responsibilities are?
All right, I'll start. I'm the Avon town historian. I've been in that position, which is a volunteer position, since 2005. And I think all Connecticut towns have a town historian appointed by the local governing board. And it's a position that is, the individual makes it what he or she wants it to be. With Terri's help and others, I have made it multi-dimensional. And we've done a lot together, accomplished a lot. And it's a real honor to be a local town historian.
Oh, okay, my turn. Well, thank you, Ethan, very much for coming to the Historical Society recently and offering to do this programming with us, because this is something we've talked about doing but never really got it off the ground. So I applaud you for this, and I hope this is going to be a success, as this is the first program. As the president of the Historical Society, it's an honor, as Nora says, to serve in a town that is so cooperative and has wonderful, great history, because people come together for history in our area. And it's nice to be in part of the United States that has deep history, and we do have that here. Local history is important to me because I think it's a sense of place. Community is place, people are in the place, and we become one together over a period of time. And that's, of course, happened for almost 400 years now in this area, with when the English first came here. Prior to that, the indigenous people have been living here for 12,500 years and have been populating this area and working this area. So we're learning a lot more, but this brings all the local history together, and we really enjoy doing that. So Nora and I have spent a lot of time on various projects that have to do with these various different topics, and we really enjoy it. So that's what we have to bring to the table for what local history is. And the Avon Historical Society started in 1974. I should just briefly give you a little history on that. When a lot of local historical societies, small ones, started in that time period, because it was right before the bicentennial in 1976, and for those of us of a certain age, we remember the bicentennial. And very quickly coming in the next couple of years, in 2026 will be the semi-quincentennial, which is the 250th. Back in the 1970s, local pride in our history was what formed a lot of the historical societies like Avon's. And so we will be having our 50th anniversary coming up just in a couple of years. And so we're pleased with that.
And I guess to follow up with that then, how did you guys get interested in studying Avon town history? And why do you think it's so important to learn about local history? What do you think it does for the community?
I'll start.
Yeah, that's you.
Let's see. I grew up in Avon, and for as long as I can remember, was just always interested in Connecticut history and colonial history and local history. And I studied it in college and graduate school, majored in American Studies. And it just seemed like that was where I was going to go. And then I worked at the Smithsonian for a while. and then came back to live in Connecticut, worked at the Wethersfield Historical Society, Avon Historical Society, and started to write, and just kept on writing. And I think it's for someone like Terri or I, studying and being part of local history, it's kind of like just what we do. It's like breathing. You know, artists paint, dancers dance, and we kind of live, breathe, and sleep locally.
Well, you asked, how does it happen? I have to say, many people in town contact us with questions. I bought an old house. I don't know the history of it. I saw your Pine Grove Schoolhouse. It's open on Sundays. It was built in 1865. You know, when was it? Why is it called number 7? You know, why is it called Pine Grove Schoolhouse? You get crazy questions all the time. You know, when did Little League start? Because our Sperry Park is going to be 100 years old pretty soon when baseball was played there. All sorts of these kind of things come from the general public. So you need somebody in town who can answer all those questions, because if somebody calls the town hall, they don't necessarily know the answers, because that's not their job to know that. That's what our job is. So it's really the public that brings some of this stuff to us, which is very helpful. I really like that.
And it's a partnership with, I mean, Terri and I work very closely with the Avon Free Public Library. The staff and volunteers in the history room are key partners.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank goodness we have the history room.
And other people that we've worked with on projects. And I think we have a very robust core group of about 10 people who help each other, share information, and don't care who gets the credit. So it may be a kind of a remarkable group.
It is. It's a unique collaboration that is not in every town, and I think we might be the envy of a few towns because of that. But not only the library, but we also have volunteers through the Historical Society who, as members, come together and help out with projects. So at any one time, not only is it the 10 people who talk to each other, and when a question comes up, they might share something, but there's about 30 people out there at any one time are doing something for the Historical Society. It could be working on historic signage in town. It could be anything, really. It could be talking to the schools. It could be setting up something for us that will be part of, like, banners that have history information on them. There are people that come to us with all sorts of ideas, and quite frankly, I love it, because if, you know, like you did, you came to us and said, I'd like to start a program and maybe a podcast. So how can we make this happen? And look what's happened in the last 6 months. We've put it all together. And with your help and your guidance, it's working. So here we are.
So you mentioned talking to schools as like some of the programming you do, and so I was wondering, kind of like, so in recent times, or I wouldn't even say in recent times, but just in general, history has not always been like the most exciting topic to study in school. And so I was wondering, like, how have you guys done some of this programming within schools? Have you guys tried to get some of the younger people in Avon interested in Avon history?
Well, all states have curriculums that they have in the public schools, and at different grade levels, they have to teach local history. In Avon, years ago, it was 3rd grade. Now I think it's at 2nd grade level. I can't remember which it is right now. But they will normally, the schools will contact us, and if they want some information from us, they can. But that is usually based on the local boards of education and what they want to do. But let me just take it the next step. What does somebody who, like you, as a senior in high school, think about a career with history? What would they do with that? And there's so many things you could do with a career in history. You could be a teacher. You could be a writer. You could be a researcher. Please, I need researchers. That's something we always need. Somebody who's willing to dig into the files, dig into the archives, dig into the photography, talk to people to get an answer to a question, because research is very, very important, because you want it to be as accurate as it possibly can be. And you could go into journalism. You could also go into organizations like the historical societies in town, you know, get involved with them. So there's a lot of different things you can do as a career with history. And it doesn't have to be ancient history, it could be modern history, just like we're going to be doing with some of these programs. We're going to be talking about modern Avon. What's happening now that will become history tomorrow? Because everything's going on today is going to become history tomorrow. And so we just, you know, we want to be able to talk about the different things that are happening. So today, this is your overview, and I'm really happy that we can do this and we can share with you. And Nora and I are at your disposal to help you with any of these as we go forward. So let's see how it goes.
All right. And so I guess kind of going off of what you're saying about like people like me who might be interested in history, what would you guys say to those people who are interested in pursuing history as a career, possibly? Like what kind of advice would you give? What kind of wisdom would you impart?
Well, think about the strengths that you might have. Let's say and if you are interested in history, do you have a time period? Do you have a location that you're interested in? Maybe you want to become an archaeologist and you want to go on digs. Maybe you want to get into archives. You don't mind being in a library and going through archives and doing some heavy-duty research in something. Those kinds of areas are what that is very much needed. Maybe you want to go into, if you get into grad school in history, you could be doing a special project like something on a monument, that you want to dive into and find out what's happening with that. There's a lot of different areas that history can be used, a lot of disciplines that you can study in college. So you really have to kind of think open and also come to all of us and just talk to us. I would encourage students to talk to us anytime about what there might be out there for them, and what their talents are and how we could put them to use.
And one way to get involved in that is for a student of certain ages, to have an interest in a topic. The Avon History Room is a rich resource with files and photographs and finding aids and a volunteer to help. And jump in and do a project and see if that passion ignites.
So would you say there's a big difference then between working on local history, like what you guys do, and working maybe at a college as some researchers do? Do you think there's a difference in the way that you interact with your local community and kind of the personal, I guess, feeling of being even contributing to a community? Would you say that's a part of local history?
Yeah, so let me give you a good example. About 12 years ago, was the beginning of a 4-year commemoration of the 150th anniversary, commemoration of the U.S. Civil War. For 4 years, we spent doing all sorts of commemorative events. We had people, we had presenters, we had reenactors, we had exhibits, we had book talks. That brought into the community the history of the Civil War and people from Avon who served in it, but also the greater picture of what the Civil War was all about. We had debates, we had talks about it. All the way through to just very recently, we had an event where we talked about race in America from the Civil War to present now, because here we are in the 2020s and we're just wondering what the next step is going to be. Where are we at in the world right now? So yes, a lot of what happened back then can be talked about all the way through to now. So this is a good way to bring the community into a conversation. And that's what we really like to do, is have the conversations about it and relating back, putting context into it.
So we're almost out of time. So do you guys have any closing statements about the Historical Society, Terri, or about the Avon Town Historian Office?
Go. I mean, just personally, I feel like we're never done. I mean, it's a wonderful feeling just to put these puzzles together, to dig.
Absolutely.
And to have the relationships with colleagues that have such similar interests, and to build up archives and collections, which we do continually. We're adding information based on our own research for hundreds of years from now. We're saving things. We're creating. And we're not dusty. We're not boring.
No, not at all.
We're really fun.
It's a lot of fun to talk about history topics in relationship to today, because a lot of things repeat, and we wonder over and over again if that's the same thing's going to happen again. But I would encourage the public to reach out to either Nora or I, or me, I should say, to ask any questions they have, talk about any of the issues that they want to talk about that maybe they're interested in with relating to our local history, state or country history, because we're all part of it. Local history is part of national history. It's all the same kind of thing. It really is. So I think that's would be a good thing to do. And also using the history room at the library, and coming to our events and attending and visiting our historic sites in town, which we'll get into in future programs. We'll talk about some of the historic sites in town as well that can be visited. So that's good.
Are there any events coming up from the Avon Historical Society?
Tonight?
No, tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. Yeah, we have an ongoing, and we will in the future into 2023 as well. We're going to have a webinar series that we have ongoing called Unearthing History, and it's about the time period of 12,500 years ago when people were inhabiting this area and how they were living and working. And this is all a result of the discovery in 2019 of a Paleo-Indian site along the Farmington River here in Avon. And so we're bringing up all sorts of topics, and tomorrow night one of the topics is ancient DNA and how what that's telling us about the early peopling of this continent. I don't want to say Avon or the United States because it wasn't that back then. It was this continent, and North America and South America as well, and how they lived and what they were like. So that's something coming up next year in 2023. We'll have a whole other series going on, and everything is on YouTube, available through the Avon Library website. So that's good.
Ethan, can we ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
All right. How did you get interested in doing this podcast series?
Well, I think that personally, I think that history podcasts and like history shows are some of the most popular shows just in general. And so to me, when people say like they're not interested in history in school, it just doesn't really make sense to me, because I know for a fact that they're interested in like, watching, I'll just say oversimplify it as an example, on history, on like YouTube, which is like a pretty prominent history channel. So I just think like it doesn't really make sense to me for people to say they're not interested in history. I think what does make sense is for people to not be interested in the way history is taught sometimes, or the way history is communicated sometimes.
Good distinction.
So to me, I think doing this podcast and doing this show, it's kind of a way where I can try to, I guess, make history not more interesting, but try to convey it in a way that I think might, I wouldn't say be everybody's cup of tea, but have maybe some more people be interested in it. And I think at the end of the day, for people who like history and for people who study history, that's sort of all you can really ask for a few more people to be interested in the work you do.
Right.
So the late historian David McCullough said that history is who we are and why. So everyone watching this, listening to this, is just a whole bundle of history, whether they're interested in it or not. So it helps to explain things. It helps to give a sense of place.
Or their genealogy. People are very much into genealogy right now. We've had a burst of that going on with Ancestry.com and the shows on TV that you can find on various channels that show people's lineage and their ancestry. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And that's great. It's bringing people to history. Anything that'll bring them together is what makes us happy. So we're good, so I appreciate that.
All right, well, that was a really nice note to close on. And I think that is all the time. So thank you so much, Nora and Terri,
Thank you for having us.
Spending the time with us. And if you're interested in learning more about the Avon Historical Society or some of the activities and events that are coming up, please feel free to visit avonhistoricalsociety.org. And that's all. So thank you so much, and have a good day.
The Avon Historical Society welcomes you to its virtual tour of the Pine Grove One-Room Schoolhouse in West Avon. Located on the corner of West Avon Road and Harris Road, this one-room schoolhouse was built in 1865. In celebration of the 1976 United States Bicentennial, the Avon Historical Society leased the school from the town, restored it, and opened it to the public. The exterior of the building exhibits some Victorian features, with its high peaked roofline and gingerbread wood detailing. The structure was inspired by drawings for a school in Rhode Island designed by architect Thomas A. Teft. This schoolhouse became District Number 7. Nearby, we see some of the farms and homes where the students lived in what was then a rural community. Students in grades 1 through 8 were taught by one teacher in this one-room schoolhouse. The class each year could range from 5 to 27 students, sometimes including ages 5 to 16. It was a huge challenge for one teacher to cover the curriculum for each grade level. The regular school day was from 9 to 4. Pupils who lived far from school, such as those living in the Sleepy Hollow section of town, now the site of Avon Old Farms Boys School, arrived each day by Shank's mare. You might call it walking, as there was no school transportation. After students passed through the main door, the boys would turn right and the girls to the left. They stored their coats, lunch pails, and recess equipment in their separate section of the entry. A door on either side provided access to the classroom. Note the original iron sink with a hand pump for children to wash their hands. The children did not drink this water. Instead, potable water was drawn from the neighboring farm's spring. The bucket was passed up and down the aisles, and each child would drink from the dipper. A well dug in 1933 took better care of their needs. Later, it also was deemed unsafe to drink, so water was again brought from Cold Spring Farm across the street. In the classroom, boys and girls were seated on separate sides. Each morning, school began by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, followed by singing My Country, 'Tis of Thee. The interior of the school, though simple, was the newest and most modern of the buildings in the 7 school districts. The original high ceiling is curved and covered with corrugated tin, painted white. As the heat from the stove rose, it was reflected back to warm the students. It also reduced the possibility of fire from the stovepipe, which at times became very hot. The older students were often charged with the responsibility of building the fire in the morning in the long box stove. On cold days, they would carry in wood to keep the fire going throughout the day. The stove served double duty during cold weather as a place to warm sandwiches and heat soup for those who could not go home for lunch. It was also used to dry wet mittens. Signs of advancement over time can be seen as we scan the classroom. In early days, sconces on the walls held oil or kerosene lamps, which provided lighting on dark or stormy days. Lamps also were necessary when the once-a-week evening prayer and singing meetings were held for families in the community. In the 1930s, power was brought to Pine Grove, and the white globe ceiling lights were installed, offering much improved lighting. Students and teachers were happy they no longer had to clean the soot in the old lamps. Behind the teacher's desk is a true blackboard attached to a weight and pulley system. This allowed the blackboard to be raised and lowered for access to the cabinets below. Once lessons were written on the board, it was raised up so the students could see their lessons, even when the teacher was standing by her desk. A roll of maps was attached above the board, and each could be raised or lowered, much like you would move blinds up and down. The other 3 boards in the classroom are slate and are called slate boards or chalkboards. Pupils would have had their own small slate, which could be used on both sides. Slates were surrounded by a wood frame, which provided some protection in case the slate was bumped or dropped. The student would write on the slate with a slate pencil wrapped in paper, just like crayons. The paper helped keep the slate pencils from breaking. Books and slates were very expensive. Such treasures were commonly handed down in the family. The neat rows of desks represent changing styles of numerous decades. Some have adjustable legs to accommodate growing children. Some have lift tops for materials to be stored inside, and others just have an opening facing the student for storage. At one time, the school used double desks, and there is one on display. Several desks have a hole in the upper right-hand corner for an inkwell. Notice the little flap over the hole in the glass well. You would close it after each use to keep the ink from spattering on the desk or on your papers. The ink was permanent and could not be washed off, so students had to be extremely careful. This is the type of pen used by students. They had steel nibs which would fit into the end of the pen. After using a nib for a long time, it might wear down or have a little rough spot or burr on it. It could be sanded so it would write smoothly again. Children used copybooks like these. They practiced to make the letters and words look just like the example at the top of the page, and the teacher would grade them on their penmanship. The teacher's desk is a reproduction of one found in a photograph taken in the school in 1912. It was made in Riverton, Connecticut by the Hitchcock Chair Factory. Many of the artifacts within the schoolhouse, such as books, teacher's handbell, and globe, vary in time periods. The small bells were used to call the children to attention if they were caught whispering or misbehaving. The larger bells were rung when school began and to call students in from recess. Here is a little quiz for you. In this school, we can see some familiar portraits. It was common for the portraits of two particular U.S. presidents to be displayed in one-room schoolhouses. Do you know who they are? The man with the white hair is sometimes called the father of our country. The man with the beard was often called Honest Abe. We will give you a moment to see if you know the answer. Yes, President George Washington was our first president of the United States, and that is why they called him the father of our country. Honest Abe was President Abraham Lincoln.